Anyone that's been in Warhammer 40k for a while now will know there's a bit of an ongoing headache with the universe as it relates to fascism. The great Imperium of Man and its intolerance towards those within and without. Some will condemn the IP out of hand for this, others dissect it as satire of the ideology, but whatever side someone takes in this discussion, I can't help but feel a great sadness when this comes up, because it's another person who has missed the forest for the trees. Let me make this clear right here and now. I'm not here to say how awesome the Imperium of Man really is. It's a nightmare for everyone involved from top to bottom. It is absolutely an empire built on fear, distrust, and misunderstanding. I'm not here to say otherwise. Though if I may go on a tangent here, it does consistently annoy me how these folks will go after the Imperium for criticism and gloss over any of the Imperium's enemies. Khorne may have whole planets slaughtered in his name, but that's demons, what would you expect? The Tau and Necrons both impose their cultures and governments on other species, enslaving those who don't comply freely, but they're aliens with different standards. The Votann strip mine whole worlds from beneath the native populace, but who can hate dwarves? No, truly it's the humans that are the problem. Humans like the Talaran Desert Raiders, who have a history of beating the odds and fighting alongside the Eldari in assistance to defend the Desert Raiders' home planet. Wherein lies my issue, as cool stories like this tend to get forgotten when people declare the Imperium to be wholly rotten. However, back on topic now, I do believe that those people are making a very weak take on the setting. Naturally, stories are stories, and they can be interpreted in any number of ways. But there are still interpretations that are very close to the surface. And in looking at those ideas, people tend to forget everything else, because they've already found the deeper meaning, so no more dissections need to be discussed. They identify that the Imperium of Man is a fascist state, but they never look deeper into why it is that way. In the process, meaning that people miss the horror and the tragedies of Warhammer 40k. We can start at the most basic level with the Imperium's standing doctrine of shoot first, don't ask questions. Anytime you see something that isn't human, make sure you're the ones who fire the first shot. An MO that's been in service since the Emperor was up and mobile. And the thing is, there's a history behind this. Turns out there are very few sapient species in the galaxy that are willing to play nice. There might even be none of them. One of the oldest examples of this comes from the 23rd millennium, predating even the Emperor, in an event known as the Cybernetic Revolt, where sapient machines created by humanity rebelled in a war so massive that apparently it would make the Horus Heresy seem like a tiny misunderstanding. It nearly led to the extinction of our species, and was one of the two major events beginning the Age of Strife, with the other one being of course the birth of Slaanesh. This is the primary reason why the Imperium, and the Mechanicus specifically, fear and loathe AI, which in their universe has come to stand for abominable intelligence. The cultural scar is so deep that even 20,000 years later, people are still willing to commit crimes against humanity, lobotomizing people into organic automatons, rather than risk another war that could wipe out everyone. And the thing of it is, this sort of mentality is not so unique to 40k. If the Mass Effect series is known for one thing, it's the ability to hit the bedroom with the ladies of other species. But even there, they had to go through an event known as the First Contact War to reach that point. Our first meeting with a species known as the Turians went very wrong. As we reached beyond our solar system, one of their ships tried to pull us over for the intergalactic equivalent of running a red light. But all we saw was an alien dreadnought bearing down on us, and it was all downhill from there. Even 20 odd years later from that event, it's still informing a lot of ways of thinking. The Cerberus organization, a group of pro-human militants, was founded by a man who fought in that war. his first experience of alien life being as it tried to blow his head off. So that informed his opinion and led him to develop very Imperial tendencies. And this sort of paranoia is still present even in more mainstream and peaceful sci-fi properties. Another universe popular for extraterrestrial diplomacy, and then getting to take them to the bedroom afterwards, is Star Trek. A story that assumes a technological pinnacle, a golden age, so it can focus on the trials of trying to live peacefully in a universe of constant hostility and misunderstanding. But even in this, there is another timeline, another dimension known as the Mirror Universe. A timeline where, when confronted with an often hostile and uncaring galaxy, people elected to harden themselves against it, forming the human-led Terran Empire. The prime directive of the primary timeline is to never interfere with a developing civilization or species. But in the Mirror Universe, the primary directive is to always assume a state of war, because for all anyone knows, they're already there. And from stories like Independence Day, XCOM, or even Battle Los Angeles, it's generally assumed that when we meet other sapient species, it's gonna be a bloodbath, with our side taking the vast majority of the casualties. And in the aftermath, do we stick to our principles of life, liberty, and understanding? Or do we think about how close we came to extinction the first time and resolve to never let it come to that again? We got burned once, but that was it. And the Imperium of Man is what happens when you let that mentality keep running for thousands upon thousands of years. Which is a chilling prospect, watching how things turn to this paranoid, hateful state. But it's also important to consider this sequence because then you can condemn the culture, but not the people. Because the people are still good. So often I see people slap them together and hate them both. Space Marines are self-righteous jackboots. The Astra Militarum are a bunch of brainwashed conscripts. Every human army has one unflattering caricature. But even in these most dire of times, the light still shines through, and for my money is all the brighter because of it. I already mentioned the Talaran, who formed a secret alliance with the Eldar after the elves helped save their home world. There is of course the famous Salamanders, and the less famous example of the Raven Guard, both of which put their lives on the line to save the people. And for every one Inquisitor Karamazov, whose entire character can be summarized in this one quote, there is another Inquisitor Eisenhorn, who went through quite the character arc. All people who are still willing to change their minds and or do good even as the underdog. Because, make no mistake, humanity is besieged on all sides and our survival is not guaranteed. Despite the presence of high technology like intergalactic travel and gene altering, the Imperium exists in a post-apocalyptic state. Technology which is used without being understood. Cultures that regress to the point of tribalistic feudalism, obey the Lord, and don't trust anyone you don't know. It's very much a medieval period, and one where the Renaissance is not guaranteed to arrive. Because we've still got to worry about those massive alien bugs attempting to devour everything in sight. If I had a penny for every time I've heard this universe compared to Starship Troopers, book or movie, I would be living a life of hedonism that would make Jordan Belfort look pious and reserved. Usually, I'm more than willing to listen to anyone's comparisons between two universes, but I've heard this one so much that it's becoming a repetitive drone. 500 characters, all with the same line. Patrolling the Warhammer 40k almost makes you wish for a Starship Troopers.
Winter.
It routinely overshadows another book, a far darker book that's much closer to the Warhammer 40k setting, at least in my mind. That being Cormac McCarthy's The Road. The image of a humanity on the brink of, or maybe even in the final stages of collapse. violently distrustful of the other, and robbed of all hope. Evil on a scale you can't imagine because you don't want to imagine. I don't want to imagine. And the idea that people would idolize the monstrous characters in this universe is asinine, but so too is criticizing the few noble ones. A Space Marine in 40k and the Father in the Road have both done things that we in the present would and should consider heinous. However, you have to grade them on a curve because they exist in a universe where the margin for error is absolutely zero. And do consider how they have to try and keep hope alive in spite of, well, everything. It's the horror that arises not from the vile actions of the people, but the idea of how they came to be this way. Not the horror of, this could be you, the corpse being dragged away by the slasher villain, but the horror of, this could be you, the man with the gun and the 1,000-yard stare. Which, in another haunting way, may be the nicest thing the Imperium can do for its people. Let's take a step forward so I can explain what I mean. There are two ways we can explain the situation to this Imperial citizen. First, we can tell him the truth, that there are beings out there that cannot be reasoned with, we do not understand, and they want to kill all of us. There's also more than one of them. Our infrastructure is mainly held together by the hope that it just won't break, up to and including the most important thing in our existence, so you do with that what you will. Or you can pass him a lasgun and tell him that the God Emperor is on his side. He can live for 80 odd years trying to come up with solutions to any one of a million problems. Or he can live for 18 hours with the opportunity to fire off a few shots in anger. In both scenarios, nothing gets accomplished, but one of them is far more immediate and understandable. No problem is so complex that it can't be solved with a gunshot. It's also in this delusion that allows the fears and worries of an entire species to be collectively passed upstairs. Everything will turn out alright because the Emperor protects. I just have to do my duty because there's someone above me who knows what's going on and has a plan. Which is the reason that Gilliman has been having a perpetual nervous breakdown for the last century because he's on the tippy top floor and the buck has stopped with him. And if you'll allow me to bloat the runtime of this video just a bit, I would like to touch on the Tau Empire and the hatred directed towards them. Now, this is a historical piece at this point. Any actual hatred for the faction lives on as a joke at this point. But with everything I've just covered, the reason why the Tau received such a hostile reception for a long time becomes much more clear. The universe of Warhammer 40k is not just the time of eternal war, but also potentially the last war. A fight at the end of all things, where all the major players on the galactic stage have gathered together their best toys to decide once and for all who will run the cosmos. And it may very well be none of them. All these dying empires with one last attempt for death or glory. But when an up-and-coming faction enters the fray, that sort of runs against the theme. Going back to my earlier example to illustrate what I mean, this would be like if someone adapted The Road and cast Keegan-Michael Key as the father. Keegan would certainly try to play the role to the best of his ability, he wouldn't want to derail the narrative, and there is potential for him to fit in. But his existing reputation as a comedy actor makes it an uphill battle from the word go. Same principle with the Tau. Nothing inherently wrong with them, and no one wants to unmake the existing universe. But their aesthetic of high technology, an empire marching out on the galactic stage with all the confidence, goes against the theme of the end times. It's the last round, with all the heavyweights broken, bloody, and tired, when in comes this featherweight looking to make his mark. Didn't work. So the Tau got darkened up a bit. They may now be the victims of the longest con in the galaxy, and their story parallels the others much better. Anyway, I just wanted to explore why the Imperium is the way that it is and talk about why it's not wholly awful. You know, it's alright to like the Imperium of Man while also recognizing that it is a fucking nightmare. That it's alright to think Space Marines are cool without actually wanting to be a Space Marine. That all-important barrier between fantasy and reality. Can we do that just for me? And if not for me, then for yourselves. And if not for yourselves, then I don't know, do it anyway, cowards. I'll see you next time. Horus went to Thrillville cause he's gone off the rails. You need to be gentle with your vibrator. So Angron lands there, comes out of his pod as a little baby, and immediately kills 5 Eldar. How exactly he performed brain surgery on himself is a question for another time. They get the slaves to kill each other, and they have a great time. Except for the slaves, they don't have a good time.